A millionaire tech founder handed his pregnant black wife divorce papers right at her mother's grave while the casket was still being lowered. She froze, holding her belly with one hand and his betrayal in the other. What he didn't know was that the woman he tried to break in her weakest moment had just become the heir to a $300 million legacy he could never touch. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The rain came down in a thin, cold mist, soft enough to blur the edges of the world but sharp enough to sting when it touched Serena Carter's cheeks. She stood beside her mother's open grave, one hand resting on her 7-month belly, the other holding the white rose she had planned to drop onto the casket. Her breath caught in her throat as the coffin descended, the dull creak of the lowering straps slicing through the silence like something breaking inside her. She felt unbearably alone, even though her husband stood inches away. Adrian Hemsworth did not look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the ground, jaw tight, posture rigid, as if he were attending the funeral of a stranger rather than the woman who had treated him like her own son. Serena glanced at him, searching for a flicker of comfort, but he offered none. No hand reaching for hers, no whisper of support, just a wall of cold detachment that made her chest ache even harder than grief itself. As the casket touched the bottom of the grave, Adrian reached into his coat pocket. For a split second, Serena thought he was pulling out a handkerchief or something sentimental, some gesture that proved he still had a heart. Instead, he pressed a thick stack of papers into her trembling hand. "Sign these," he said quietly, his voice steady in a way that felt unnatural at a burial. "I've already signed my part." Serena blinked, rain mixing with tears as she looked down and saw the bold printed title, Petition for Divorce. Her fingers went numb, the pages threatening to slip from her grasp. The world narrowed to the wet earth beneath her feet and the thundering panic in her chest. She swallowed hard, unable to form words. Adrian didn't soften. "I'm done pretending. This marriage is suffocating me. I've moved on. Serena." His tone had the calm finality of a business deal, not the end of a vow. "Madison is pregnant. She needs me." The words landed like blows. Serena instinctively wrapped her arm tighter around her belly, as if shielding her child from the cruelty spilling so casually from the man she once trusted. Madison, young, pale, polished, was everything Serena was not, at least through the eyes of a wealthy family desperate to replace her. From a short distance away, Richard and Eleanor Damon watched under a large black umbrella, their daughter Chloe standing beside them. Their expressions were unreadable but unmistakably satisfied, as though this moment was the culmination of something they had long anticipated. Serena's vision blurred. "Why here? Why today?" Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Adrian exhaled with impatience. "Because dragging this out helps no one. Just sign." Her knees weakened. The pen he shoved into her hand felt heavier than any burden she had ever carried. With rain soaking the edges of the papers and grief pressing against her chest, she scrawled her signature. Her mother's casket lay at the bottom of the grave behind her, and somehow this betrayal hurt more. When she handed the papers back, her fingers slipped, and she stumbled in the mud. Adrian stepped away instead of helping. The Damons turned and began walking toward their car, satisfied that the problem in their family had finally been handled. Serena's knees buckled. She fell into the wet soil, her dress stained as the cold earth splashed against her skin. She reached out instinctively toward nothing, toward no one. Adrian didn't look back as he followed his family, leaving Serena kneeling in front of her mother's grave, rain pouring down as if the sky itself mourned what had just been taken from her. The house felt hollow when Serena returned, as though her mother's warmth had been stripped from the walls. Every room carried a trace of Maya Lawson, her handwriting on recipe cards, the faint scent of lavender from the throw blanket draped over the couch, the quiet order of a life built with care. Serena walked through the silence, her footsteps soft, her heart heavier with each passing second. Losing her mother was one blow. Being abandoned at the funeral was another. Together, they felt unbearable. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't want to read. Eleanor Damon's sharp words appeared again and again, disguised as politeness, but dripping with contempt. "It's best for everyone if you finalize things quickly." Friends stayed silent. Social media flooded with photos of Adrian and Madison smiling at a restaurant, her hand resting on a perfectly flat stomach. People commented about new beginnings, unaware of the devastation behind the images. Serena turned off her phone, leaned against the kitchen counter, and tried to breathe. The doctor had warned her that stress this late in pregnancy was dangerous, but where could she possibly find relief? The world she had built was gone, dissolved in less than a week. That night, unable to sleep, Serena wandered into her mother's office. Maya had always kept the door closed, insisting the room stayed organized because it held important things. Serena had respected that boundary, never opening drawers or cabinets. Tonight, though, grief tugged her forward like an invisible hand, guiding her toward something she didn't yet understand. She began to tidy absent-mindedly, running her fingers along the edges of neatly stacked folders. When she pulled on the lowest drawer, it stuck. She tried again. Still stuck. With a harder pull, it slid open slightly, revealing a single cream-colored envelope pressed into the back corner. Her name was written on the front, in her mother's handwriting. For Serena, open only when you truly need it. Her throat tightened. She sat down slowly, holding the envelope as though it might crumble. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small brass key. Maya's familiar loops and curves covered the page. If you are reading this, my sweet girl, then you are hurting. If you feel alone, betrayed, or pushed to a place where you see no way forward, go to the bank with this key. There are things I prepared to protect you and your child, long before today. Serena read the words twice, then a third time, struggling to understand why her mother had anticipated betrayal. Maya had seemed healthy, wise, grounded, but never fearful. What had she seen? The next morning, with trembling hands but a growing sense of resolve, Serena went to First Atlanta Bank. The key fit a private safety deposit box. When the metal door opened, Serena expected family mementos or a few documents. Instead, thick binders, sealed folders, and financial certificates filled the space. Her breath caught as she lifted the first binder. A bank employee helped her assess the documents: investment portfolios, tech company shares, property deeds, early-stage equity positions in companies she recognized from headlines. The numbers didn't make sense until the banker quietly said, "Miss Carter, these assets are worth approximately $300 million. The room seemed to tilt. Serena closed her eyes as shock rushed through her. Her mother, the quiet accountant who clipped coupons and wore the same gray coat every winter, had been building an empire in silence. Later, attorney Samuel King stepped into the room, explaining that he had handled Maya's affairs for more than 20 years. Maya had created a trust naming Serena as the sole beneficiary, legally shielded from any spouse. She had anticipated the Damons' disdain, their judgment, and their ability to manipulate Adrian. She had planned accordingly. Samuel offered her another letter, written years earlier but sealed until now. Maya had noticed Adrian's growing distance. She feared Serena would be hurt by the prejudice woven into his family's beliefs. Unable to stop it, she chose instead to empower her daughter for the day she might need to stand alone. Serena pressed the letter to her chest, tears warm against her cheeks. Hours earlier, she had believed her life had collapsed. Now she realized her mother had been preparing a lifeline all along, one rooted in wisdom, love, and protection. When she returned home, exhausted but steadier than before, Samuel asked gently, "Do you want to use this truth to run or to rise?" Serena looked down at her belly, feeling her daughter move, and understood this was the moment everything changed. Serena sat in the private conference room of First Atlanta Bank, the morning light spilling across the polished table where stacks of documents lay waiting. It felt strange to be here, surrounded not by grief but by the weight of something she didn't yet know how to name. The air was still, heavy with the sense that she had stepped out of one life and into another without warning. Samuel King sat across from her, steady and composed, as if he had watched this moment approach for years. He began explaining the structure of the trust Maya had built, his tone calm but firm, revealing how meticulously her mother had protected every dollar. Maya had seen far beyond the surface of Serena's marriage, far beyond the polite smiles of the Damon family. She had understood the vulnerability her daughter faced, the intersection of race, class, and power, and she had planned for it with the sharpness of someone who had been underestimated all her life. As Samuel spoke, Serena felt the truth settling onto her shoulders. Her mother had not only loved her, she had prepared her. The numbers in the documents blurred together: tech shares, property portfolios, investment distributions. To anyone else, they might have represented freedom, but to Serena, they looked like responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. She had never considered herself powerful. She had been someone's wife, someone's daughter. Now she was the heir to an empire she didn't know how to hold. Samuel slid another letter across the table. This one was longer, written years earlier. It revealed pieces of Maya's past Serena had never been allowed to see. Maya had once thrived in a New York investment firm, but the brilliance she showed was constantly overshadowed by colleagues who dismissed her because of the color of her skin. She pushed through the noise until the cost became too high, until she realized she didn't want her daughter growing up in an environment that measured her worth through bias. Maya had left the city not in defeat but with a decision: to build in silence, on her own terms, for the sake of the child, who would inherit everything she could not say aloud. For a moment, Serena saw her mother as a young woman, determined, outnumbered in a boardroom of white men, but unbroken. It was easy now to understand how Maya had constructed this fortune, why she had kept it hidden, why she had watched the Damon family with careful, guarded eyes. Her mother had not been fragile, she had been strategic. Samuel's voice softened as he told her that wealth like this could not be carried alone. She needed guidance, structure, and a team who understood both the opportunity and the danger that came with it. He introduced Catherine Lee, a financial advisor with a reputation for razor-sharp insight and unwavering discretion. Catherine walked into the room with the composure of someone accustomed to managing empires. She greeted Serena with warmth, but her eyes held an evaluating sharpness, as though she were already imagining the woman Serena could become. Catherine explained that going public now would be a mistake. Serena needed to rebuild her image, reshape how Atlanta saw her. She needed to emerge not as a scorned wife, but as a poised, formidable woman carrying forward her mother's legacy. The key was strategy, not spectacle. Appear in the right rooms, speak at the right moments, and allow curiosity to grow before offering answers. For the first time since the funeral, Serena felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not vengeance, clarity. She wasn't meant to fight Adrian or the Damon family head-on. She was meant to rise above them until they were forced to look up. Catherine suggested creating the Maya Lawson Foundation, a philanthropic force that would honor her mother and position Serena within the circles where true influence began. It would be her introduction to a world that had never considered her a contender. Serena agreed, though uncertainty still trembled beneath her resolve. Catherine wasn't finished. Before stepping into this new chapter, Serena needed to know the truth about the people who had conspired to push her out. Samuel placed a thick folder in front of her, the work of Detective Morgan Cole, filled with evidence that was both devastating and necessary. "You have more strength than you realize," Catherine told her. "They think you're the heartbroken black wife they left behind. They have no idea you are the heiress of $300 million, and when you step forward, Atlanta will see you for exactly who you are." Serena touched the folder, feeling its weight, understanding it would change the rest of her life. The room seemed brighter, sharper, as though she were finally standing in the light her mother always knew she would reach. The next day, Serena sat in Samuel King's law office, a quiet room lined with dark wood and the soft hum of air conditioning. Catherine sat beside her, hands folded neatly, while Samuel spread the contents of Morgan Cole's investigation across the table. The evidence formed a cruel mosaic of betrayal, but Serena forced herself to look at each piece. She needed the truth, not the version she had been fed. Morgan began with photographs taken during business trips, Adrian and Madison meeting in hotel bars, exchanging looks that betrayed far more than professional closeness. Then came the messages, time-stamped 9 months earlier, warm and intimate. Serena felt the sting but did not break. She had already cried enough for a man who had walked away from her at her mother's grave. Emails followed, written late at night, confirming that their affair had begun while Serena carried Adrian's child. Each detail chipped away at the narrative she once believed, revealing that she had not been unworthy, she had been targeted. Morgan handed her the next document, a message Madison had sent a friend, confidently explaining how she planned to pretend to be pregnant to keep Adrian close. She even included a stolen ultrasound image. The calculation was almost stunning in its audacity. Serena felt a coldness settle around her anger. This wasn't just betrayal, it was manipulation. Then came the email thread between Eleanor Damon and Madison. Names had been redacted for legality, but the intention was unmistakable. Eleanor suggested that Adrian should choose the right moment to end the marriage, implying Serena was a liability to the family's image. It wasn't open hatred, but it was worse polished condescension, dressed in coded language that reduced Serena to an inconvenience. Samuel showed her a transaction record. $20,000 transferred from Eleanor to Madison 3 weeks before the funeral. Nothing incriminating was written in the memo, but the implication was clear. Madison had not worked alone. Serena leaned back, breathing slowly. She could see now why Maya had stayed silent, why her mother had chosen caution over confrontation. Maya had recognized who these people were long before Serena did. Samuel promised her that every piece of evidence had been collected legally and could be used if the situation escalated. Serena nodded, absorbing the reassurance. She wasn't planning to wage war, but she would not be defenseless again. Catherine shifted the conversation. If Serena wanted to step back into society stronger than before, timing mattered. She couldn't release these truths now. The Damons needed to wonder, to fear the unknown. Silence could be the most powerful weapon. She outlined a 3-phase plan. Serena would cut off all contact with Adrian and his family, appear at high-profile community events where her presence would spark curiosity, and quietly build a new image rooted in intelligence and dignity. By the time the truth emerged, it would validate the woman Serena had already become. Serena felt something click into place. She was done reacting. She would lead. She stood, holding the folder of evidence, her other hand resting protectively on her belly. The memory of falling into the mud at her mother's grave flickered briefly across her mind, but it no longer defined her. "They thought they buried me that day," she said quietly, "but that was the day I rose." Tenor. The words hung in the air like a promise, one that would carry her into the next chapter of her life, toward the moment Atlanta would finally see who Serena Carter truly was. Serena stood in front of the full-length mirror inside her newly arranged dressing room, the soft morning light catching the sheen of the black silk gown Catherine held up behind her. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, it was the kind of elegance that spoke without raising its voice. Serena studied her reflection, her rounded belly, her bare shoulders, her steady eyes, and for the first time in months, she saw a woman who might one day command a room instead of shrinking inside one. Catherine adjusted the straps and nodded with quiet satisfaction, urging Serena to remember that tonight was not about appearance but about presence. "You're not showing off," she said. "You're reclaiming how the world sees you." After work, the pediatric hospital fundraiser that evening was bustling with donors, doctors, politicians, and socialites. Serena entered with calm grace, offering polite smiles, never trying too hard. Whispers circled the room almost instantly. Few people even knew she was attending, and none expected her to sign a 6-figure check on behalf of the Maya Lawson Foundation. When she did, silence rippled through the crowd. Conversations paused, eyebrows lifted. Serena simply thanked the organizers and stepped aside as if donating such a sum were nothing extraordinary. Mayor Monica Harris approached with a warm smile, greeting Serena like an old friend. She guided her toward the VIP table, ignoring the startled looks from those who always believed Serena belonged on the outskirts of these gatherings. Serena held her head high but not arrogantly, keeping her hands folded over her belly as if grounding herself in the child who had sparked this transformation. Flashbulbs flickered from the corners of the room, capturing her from all angles, the strength in her shoulders, the serene expression, the glow that blended motherhood and rising power into something quietly magnetic. Across town, Eleanor Damon sat frozen on her couch, staring at a photo of Serena beside several high-profile donors and Ethan Zuckerman, one of the most respected founders in the tech world. It didn't make sense. This was the same woman Eleanor had dismissed as insignificant, someone she assumed would fade once Adrian left. Yet here Serena was, standing confidently among people the Damon family had tried for years to impress. Chloe hovered behind her mother, trying to rationalize it. "She must know someone," she murmured. "Or maybe she's using the Damon name to get into these rooms." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. Something about Serena's posture, steady, dignified, suggested she no longer needed anyone's name to open doors. Back at the fundraiser, Serena remained composed despite the growing attention. She moved from table to table, speaking briefly with pediatric surgeons and community leaders. Every gesture felt natural, unforced. She offered no explanations, no details about her private life. Her silence became its own kind of intrigue, leaving people wondering how she had risen so quickly from the ashes of a very public heartbreak. Over the next few weeks, she continued appearing at select events, an art gala, a charity auction, a scholarship dinner. Each time, she contributed generously, listened more than she spoke, and carried herself with a calm assurance that invited speculation. Some whispered she had inherited something significant. Others thought a major investor was backing her. But Serena merely smiled when approached, referencing her mother's values and the importance of giving back. Never once did she mention Adrian. Never once did she acknowledge the Damon family. Catherine guided her every step, reminding her that grace could be a weapon sharper than accusation. "Let them wonder," she said. "Mystery can be more powerful than truth when used correctly." Well, the turning point came at a prestigious education luncheon. Serena sat beside Ethan Zuckerman as they discussed potential collaborations for underrepresented youth. When the check presenter announced Serena's donation, a remarkably generous one, the room scattered into murmurs, and from across the hall, Eleanor Damon stood frozen, pale with disbelief, watching Serena laugh softly at something Ethan said. It was the final confirmation she didn't want. Whatever Serena had become, she was no longer within the Damon's control. That afternoon, Eleanor called Adrian, her voice trembling. "She has money," she said, "a lot of it. And if this continues, our family will be humiliated. You need to find out what's going on before it's too late." For the first time, fear not contempt drove her words, and that fear was about to spread. Adrian sat alone in his office, the soft glow of his computer screen illuminating the growing tension on his face. Article after article showcased Serena at high-profile events, her name printed beside figures he had spent years trying to impress. As he clicked through photographs of her at the hospital fundraiser, the art gala, and that luncheon beside Ethan Zuckerman, an unfamiliar sensation tightened in his chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was unease. The woman he had left behind, confident she would crumble without him, had somehow risen beyond anything he could explain. His mind flashed back to the graveside, Serena in the rain, clutching her belly, tears mixing with mud. He had told himself then that she would be fine, that she would move on like anyone else. But now he wasn't sure he even knew who Serena Carter truly was. Madison walked into the room, her expression carefully crafted into one of fatigue. "Rough day?" she asked, placing a hand on her stomach with theatrical subtlety. Adrian stared at the gesture, something inside him twisting. He asked if he could accompany her to her next appointment. Madison's smile wavered as she mumbled excuses, strict doctor policies, scheduling conflicts, anything to deflect the growing pressure. Her explanations were thin, too thin, and Adrian, who once believed every word she said, felt the first sting of suspicion. She showed him a sonogram on her phone, but he stared at the image longer than he ever had before. Something felt off. The framing looked generic, too clean. He remembered how Serena's ultrasound looked: names, dates, measurements. This image felt like a placeholder rather than proof. At the Damon estate, panic was already spreading. Eleanor paced the living room while Richard tapped through financial news on his tablet, each headline about Serena tightening the knot in his stomach. Chloe, usually dismissive, sat quietly, absorbing the unsettling reality that the woman they had pushed aside might be far more formidable than they imagined. When Richard finally spoke, his tone lacked its usual superiority. "We underestimated her," he admitted. It was not praise, it was dread. Meanwhile, Adrian's inbox filled with messages from partners concerned about the image of him abandoning his pregnant wife. Some were gentle warnings, others thinly veiled ultimatums. His reputation, carefully curated over the years, was slipping through his fingers like water, and Serena, intentionally or not, was rising in direct contrast. That evening, unable to shake the tension, Adrian confronted Madison directly. "Are you really pregnant?" he asked, his voice quiet but edged with something sharp. Madison's eyes darted away, her throat tightening as she stammered out a response that fell apart before it even left her lips. Her silence was louder than any confession. Across town, Serena sat in Maya's reading room, the lamp casting a warm glow over the documents spread around her. She reread the lines from Madison's message, confessing the fake pregnancy scheme, but instead of anger, she felt a steady calm settle in her chest. She no longer needed rage. She had truth, timing, and power. She felt her mother's presence in the quiet, the same quiet she once mistook for weakness but now recognized as strength. Catherine called to update her. The Damon family was unraveling. Their grip on the narrative was slipping. Their confidence was cracking. It was time for phase 2. Serena didn't need to expose them. All she had to do was keep showing up, stronger each time, until the contrast between who she had become and who they truly were became undeniable. That night, Adrian stood in his apartment staring at his reflection, phone still in his hand, Madison's lies echoing in the silence. He whispered the question he had once thought impossible. "Serena, what are you hiding from me?" But the truth was that Serena wasn't hiding anymore. She was emerging, and he was only just beginning to realize what he had thrown away. Serena woke in the middle of the night, her breath catching as a sharp contraction tightened across her abdomen. For a moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the wave pass. She knew instantly this was it, the moment her body had been preparing for, the moment her life would split into a before and an after. But instead of fear, a steady calm moved through her. She rose slowly, gathered the hospital bag she had packed days earlier, slipped on a coat, and called a car to Piedmont Hospital. The world outside was quiet, Atlanta wrapped in a soft blanket of darkness as if holding its breath for her. Inside the labor room, she was alone, but the loneliness didn't hollow her the way it once had. There was no Adrian pacing nervously, no members of the Damon family offering forced, polite smiles. Yet Serena felt surrounded not by people, but by a quiet strength that seemed to come from the memory of her mother. Every breath she took felt guided by Maya's voice. "Pain will pass, baby. All you have to do is move through it." Serena held those words close as the contractions came faster, deeper, demanding more of her than she thought she had left. Hours blurred together, surges of pain, the rhythm of nurses moving around her, the soft encouragement from the doctor, but Serena never panicked. She breathed, focused, gripped the rails when she needed to, and let go when she could. Sweat dampened her forehead, tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, but she stayed steady, grounded in the belief that she was stronger than anything that had tried to break her. After 7 long hours, the room filled with a thin, sharp cry that lifted every ounce of exhaustion off her chest. The doctor placed a tiny, warm body onto her skin, and Serena inhaled sharply, overwhelmed by the small miracle staring up at her. The baby's eyes, dark, deep, familiar, held a trace of Maya so clearly that Serena felt her heart swell and ache all at once. She whispered the name she had already chosen, a name woven with honor and memory. Margaret Maya Carter. Holding her daughter, Serena felt something ignite a quiet but undeniable power. She was no longer the woman who kneeled in the mud at a graveside. She was a mother, an heiress, a woman carrying forward the legacy of someone who had fought her battles long before she knew they existed. The hospital room felt peaceful, filled with a stillness that made Serena aware of the threshold she had crossed. The nurses brought flowers and small congratulatory gifts delivered from various organizations Serena had supported. Cards from local leaders followed, praising her contributions and welcoming the newborn with warmth. In less than a month, Serena had become a name of interest in Atlanta, one spoken with admiration, curiosity, and growing respect. Meanwhile, Adrian remained unaware of his daughter's birth. Serena had removed him from every contact list and never informed him of her due date. His absence was no longer a wound, it was a choice she made to protect the world she was building. For the first time, his opinion, his presence, his acknowledgement meant nothing. Across the city, Adrian sat in his office, staring at yet another email from a concerned investor urging him to address the controversy surrounding his personal life. His mind stretched thin, tugged between guilt and fear as whispers within the company grew louder. He didn't know Serena had given birth, but the silence surrounding her only sharpened the anxiety clawing at him. Back at the hospital, Serena cradled Margaret, studying the tiny fingers curled around her own. She understood that every decision from here forward had to be measured, thoughtful, and aligned with the legacy Maya spent a lifetime building. Her daughter deserved a future shaped by strength, not by the shadow of the family that had discarded them. Catherine arrived carrying elegant white flowers, her presence soft but intentional. She kissed Serena on the forehead and studied the baby with a smile. "She's perfect," she said. "Rest while you can. When you leave this hospital, we begin phase 3. Serena nodded, brushing her thumb gently across her daughter's cheek. She felt the shift inside her, subtle but powerful, as if the pieces of her life were finally clicking into their rightful places. She was ready, ready for her role, ready for the future, ready for the reckoning to come. She closed her eyes, holding Margaret close, and the chapter closed with the unmistakable sense that Serena was no longer rising. She had already risen. The first spark came from an article in the Atlanta Financial Journal that morning. A new heiress emerges. The Maya Lawson Foundation funds $1 million initiative for Black women entrepreneurs. The headline didn't mention Adrian, but the city's upper circles didn't need names to make connections. They had watched Serena's appearances, quiet, elegant, strategic, and now whispers spread through country clubs, boardrooms, and charity luncheons. People who once dismissed her as nothing more than the ex-wife of a tech millionaire now wondered who she truly was and what power she possessed. But Serena offered no interviews, no public explanations. She let her actions speak, and her silence only fueled the fascination. The mystery made her untouchable, a figure shaped by confidence rather than scandal. Her absence from social media, her refusal to address Adrian, and her steady involvement in philanthropic events created an aura that no amount of gossip could diminish. Across the city, Adrian sat in his office, staring at the article with disbelief. $1 million. Serena didn't borrow money. She didn't come from wealth. Nothing about this made sense. He felt a pressure growing in his chest, a sense that the ground was shifting beneath him in ways he couldn't control. He called his mother, demanding answers. Eleanor recounted, her voice quivering, how she had seen Serena at the luncheon sitting with Ethan Zuckerman. He chose her table, Adrian. Do you understand what that means? Her fear was palpable, and for the first time, Adrian felt real uncertainty settling into his bones. Chloe stepped into the conversation, insisting Serena must be trying to attack their family's reputation by elevating her own status. But Richard quickly dismissed the idea, his voice unnervingly calm. She is outgrowing us. Whether intentionally or not, she is stepping into circles far beyond our influence. Meanwhile, Madison arrived at Adrian's office, eager for attention, but the dynamic had shifted. Adrian's patience had frayed. He watched her gestures carefully, analyzing every word, every glance. When he asked again about attending her next appointment, Madison's face tightened, panic flickering behind her carefully drawn expression. Adrian no longer pretended not to see it. That evening, Serena returned home with Margaret, settling into the quiet luxury of the Lawson estate. Sunlight filtered through soft drapes as she walked through the rooms Maya had once filled, understanding now how much thought her mother put into leaving her something safe, something whole. Margaret slept peacefully against her chest, and Serena felt her heart soften but never weaken. Strength and tenderness lived side by side now, each feeding the other. Catherine arrived with a folder containing coverage from the past week. The articles praised Serena's philanthropic influence and her poised presence. Serena read them without pride and without worry, simply acknowledging the momentum building around her. She didn't need to force anything. The truth, the legacy, and the public perception were all aligning exactly as Catherine predicted. That same night, Adrian received a photo not from Serena, but from a mutual acquaintance who had visited the hospital. Serena holding Margaret, her face soft and peaceful, her posture assured. Adrian stared at the image for a long time, the world around him dissolving into a blur. Something in his expression cracked, a mix of regret, fear, and dawning realization. He sat awake until dawn, unable to escape the question echoing in his mind, louder than guilt, louder than pride, louder than every lie he had told himself. Serena, who have you become? And what did I throw away? The stage was set. The reckoning was no longer on its way, it had already begun. Serena stood before the mirror, the quiet of the hotel suite wrapping around her like a cocoon. Catherine fastened the final clasp on the black gown, a sleek, elegant silhouette that framed Serena not as a woman recovering from heartbreak, but as someone who had stepped fully into her power. The fabric shimmered subtly as she turned, and for the first time Serena saw a version of herself that even she hadn't dared imagine. She was no longer the woman who collapsed in the mud beside her mother's grave. She was the one standing now, the one who would write the final chapter of her own story. Catherine rested a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Tonight is the night Atlanta learns your name." The ballroom of Atlanta's most prestigious hotel buzzed with anticipation. Its golden chandeliers glowed brightly, reflecting across marble floors and the glittering attire of CEOs, senators, judges, and founders. Everything about the room signaled wealth and influence, but tonight the center of gravity shifted the moment Serena entered. Conversations faltered. Photographers swiveled toward her, drawn not just by the elegance she wore but by the silence she had maintained for months, a silence that made her presence feel like a revelation. Serena moved through the crowd with unforced grace, acknowledging greetings with a confident nod. Catherine walked beside her, speaking quietly, as if choreographing a performance they'd prepared for long before this night. Serena inhaled the scent of lilies and polished wood and felt the room bend, not from intimidation, but from control. Hers. Across the ballroom, the Damon family gathered in a tight semicircle near the back. Richard's jaw clenched. Eleanor's hands trembled on her clutch. Chloe whispered anxiously to her mother, glancing repeatedly toward Serena. Their discomfort was almost palpable. They hadn't wanted to attend, but skipping the gala of a rapidly rising foundation run by the woman they once dismissed would have been a public admission of weakness. Even so, being in a room ruled by Serena felt like a punishment they had never prepared for. Adrian entered late, scanning the ballroom until his eyes found her. He froze. She looked nothing like the woman he had left at the graveside. Power radiated from her in a quiet, controlled way that unsettled him deeply. He felt as if he were watching a stranger who now held every ounce of the attention he once craved for himself. Madison arrived moments later, clinging to the illusion of poise, but the stares she received were sharp with judgment, and whispers followed her like a shadow. Her confidence wavered as she noticed the distance people placed between themselves and her, as if her presence might stain their reputations. When the lights dimmed and Serena walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. She stood at the podium, her posture strong, her expression serene. She spoke about her mother, the brilliance, the endurance, the quiet ambition of Maya Lawson, and how the foundation sought to honor that legacy by uplifting women who had been overlooked for far too long. Her voice neither quivered nor hardened. It remained steady, filled with gratitude rather than grief. Then she mentioned the number $300 million. A ripple of astonishment moved through the crowd. Even those who had speculated about her wealth had never imagined this. The Damon family stiffened, processing the truth they had never seen coming. Serena paused and said she wanted to share a brief story about how the foundation truly began. The room leaned in collectively. She described the moment she received divorce papers at her mother's burial. She never named Adrian. She didn't need to. Her words carried weight not because she shamed anyone, but because she told the truth without theatrics. The simplicity of her tone sliced deeper than anger could have. Then the screen behind her came alive. A timeline appeared, dates, text excerpts, financial transfers, each presented professionally, legally, free of sensationalism. The audience saw enough to understand the betrayal she endured and the calculated cruelty behind it. Faces paled. Murmurs spread like fire. Madison crumpled in her chair, her bravado dissolving. Adrian stood abruptly, as if he could stop the unraveling, but he was met with nothing but the cold judgment of those around him. Eleanor's face hardened, realizing this was not just a scandal, it was a reckoning. Serena ended with a single line. The truth always finds its way into the light. I am not here to punish anyone. I am here to make sure my mother's story doesn't fade in silence. The ballroom rose to its feet. The applause was not frantic or sympathetic, it was reverent. As Serena stepped off the stage, she did not look toward Adrian or the Damons. She walked forward, surrounded by the applause meant for a woman who had risen beyond pain, beyond betrayal, into her own power. And her silence, once used to diminish her, became the very force that condemned them. The morning sun had barely risen when headlines began flooding every major news outlet in Atlanta. Serena Carter unveils $300 million legacy and the truth behind her divorce. Damon family faces ethical scandal following gala revelation. Tech millionaire Adrian Hemsworth loses investor confidence. The story spread faster than anyone could have predicted, and every publication echoed variations of the same truth. The woman many assumed had been broken was the one who now stood above them all. At Adrian's company, the board convened an emergency meeting. Investors expressed concern about the moral optics of his actions, and several partners paused collaborations until ethical clarity could be restored. Adrian sat in stunned silence as the consequences he never foresaw unraveled in rapid succession. A man once admired for his innovation now found his name attached to betrayal and humiliation. Madison vanished from public view. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight, and rumors swirled about financial investigations tied to Eleanor's questionable transfer. Without Adrian's support and without the Damon family's backing, she became nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in elite circles. The Damon family's downfall unfolded with swift precision. Richard was removed from consideration for a prestigious business award due to ethical concerns. Eleanor received notice that her memberships in several high society clubs were suspended pending review. Chloe faced a suspension from her fashion firm, her polished facade crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. The family that once looked down on Serena now struggled to maintain even a fraction of the status they had used to judge her. Meanwhile, Serena sat in the bright, open office of the Maya Lawson Foundation. Sunlight poured across the desk where she reviewed proposals for new programs supporting women of color. The atmosphere was warm, grounded, full of purpose. Serena felt no thrill at the Damon family's collapse, only peace, the kind that comes after surviving a storm and realizing the sky has cleared. A letter arrived from Adrian, a long, remorseful apology, begging to see his daughter. Serena read it once, then handed it to Samuel. All visitation would be handled legally, with supervision. She would not allow chaos back into her child's life. Margaret, now cooing softly in her bassinet nearby, deserved stability, strength, and the safety Maya had worked so tirelessly to secure. Partnership offers flowed into the foundation. Catherine arrived with a smile, carrying a stack of invitations from leaders, philanthropists, and organizations eager to align with Serena's vision. Among them were heartfelt letters from women who saw themselves in Serena, women inspired by her resilience, her composure, her ability to rise without bitterness. When Serena finally agreed to give a public statement, it was brief but powerful. Standing before the cameras with Margaret in her arms, she said, "Women don't have to be strong every moment, but once we rise, the world must adjust." Be us. The city embraced her words, repeating them across news broadcasts, social media feeds, and conference stages. She had become more than a survivor, she had become a symbol. That evening, Serena stepped onto the balcony of her home, holding her daughter as the lights of Atlanta shimmered like scattered stars. A warm breeze brushed her cheeks, carrying with it the memory of Maya's strength. Serena Carter had not merely reclaimed her life. She had rewritten it entirely, shaping a new legacy, one built from grace, intelligence, and the quiet determination passed down from a mother who saw far beyond the horizon. And as she gazed over the city, Serena knew she had finally become the woman Maya always believed she could be. Hope has a quiet way of finding us, even on the days when everything feels too heavy to hold. Life doesn't always spare us from heartbreak or betrayal, but it does offer us the chance to rise again with steadier hands, clearer eyes, and a heart that knows its own worth. And sometimes, the very moments that break us open are the ones that make room for a new beginning. If this story found you tonight, maybe while you're winding down after a long day or listening with the rain outside your window, tell me in the comments what part stayed with you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like more stories that remind you of your own strength, feel free to subscribe so we can keep sharing these moments together.